The crystal champagne glasses clinked around me as I stood in my family's grand ballroom, my hand tightly gripping Daniel's. The annual Harrison Foundation Gala was in full swing, Boston's elite mingling and networking in their finest evening wear. But all eyes were on us, or more specifically, on the simple silver band adorning my left hand. A teacher. My mother's perfectly painted lips barely moved as she hissed the word. Alexandra, please tell me this is some sort of joke. My name is Alexandra Harrison, and at 25, I was about to shatter my family's carefully constructed world. The Harrisons weren't just wealthy. We were old money, Boston aristocracy, with an investment firm that had been shaping the city's financial landscape for 3 generations. Daniel is a high school physics teacher, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my chest. And we're getting married in June. My father's face darkened as he looked Daniel up and down, taking in his rented tuxedo and modest watch. To Charles Harrison IE, these weren't just fashion choices. They were damning evidence of what he considered a fatal flaw, being poor. Outside. Now, my father's command cut through the ambient chatter of the gala. Without waiting for a response, he turned and strode toward his study, my mother following in his wake. Daniel squeezed my hand. Want me to come with you? I shook my head, forcing a smile. I need to handle this alone. The walk to my father's study felt like a march to the executioner's block. The sounds of the gala faded behind me as I made my way down the familiar hallway, past the portraits of Harrison patriarchs who had built our family's legacy. My grandfather's stern face seemed to judge me from his gilt frame as I passed. Inside the study, my father stood behind his massive mahogany desk, the same desk where he taught me about investment strategies when I was 12. My mother perched on the leather sofa, her champagne glass now filled with something stronger. Have you completely lost your mind? My father's voice was quiet, which was always more dangerous than his shouting. A public school teacher. Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation? Daniel is brilliant, I said, standing my ground. He's dedicated to his students, passionate about education. Passionate about our money, you mean? My mother interjected. Really, Alexandra, how naive can you be? The irony of her words almost made me laugh. If they only knew that Daniel had tried to talk me out of the engagement when he learned about my family's wealth, worried that it would change our relationship. He doesn't want our money, I said firmly. In fact, he's the one who suggested a prenup. My father scoffed. Of course he did. He's playing the long game, making himself look noble. I wasn't born yesterday, Alexandra. No, I agreed, feeling a surge of courage. You were born into wealth and privilege, just like I was. But Daniel built himself up from nothing. He worked his way through college, earned his master's degree while teaching full-time. Spare us the Hallmark movie plot, my mother cut in. This isn't about his inspiring backstory. This is about the future of the Harrison name. The future? I felt my careful composure starting to crack. You mean the future where I take over Harrison Investment Group and marry someone from your approved list of suitable bachelors? Someone like Thomas Wellington Ivy, perhaps? My father's eyes narrowed. Thomas would be an excellent match. The Wellington Group's merger with Harrison would create one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast. I don't love Thomas. Love. My father spat the word like it was poison. You think love built this? He gestured to the room around us, to the wealth that had defined our family for generations. Strategy built this. Smart alliances. Understanding your place in the greater scheme. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm marrying Daniel. I don't need your approval, but I'd like your blessing. My father walked around the desk, stopping directly in front of me. If you marry that man, you are no longer a Harrison. No trust fund, no inheritance, no position at the firm. You'll be cut off completely. Is that what you want? The threat hung in the air between us. The Harrison Trust Fund wasn't just money. It was security, opportunity, power. Walking away from it meant starting from nothing. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze. Yes, if those are my options. Alexandra, my mother stood up, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she used when she wanted something. Think about what you're doing. You've worked so hard, gotten your MBA, prepared to take over the firm. Would you throw all that away for some teacher? I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm choosing my own path. Then you choose it with nothing, my father said coldly. Harrison Investment Group will never be yours. You'll never see a penny of your trust fund. You want to live like common people. Fine, get out. My mother gasped. Charles. No, Margaret, she's made her choice. He turned his back on me, walking to the window. You have until morning to clear out your things from the house. After that, you're no longer welcome here. I stood there for a moment, waiting for them to change their minds, to show some sign that their love for me was stronger than their pride. But my father remained at the window, and my mother simply sank back onto the sofa, lifting her glass to her lips with a trembling hand. Goodbye then, I said softly, turning to leave. At the door, I paused. You know, Grandfather used to tell me that true wealth isn't about money. It's about having the courage to build something meaningful. My father's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn around. I walked back to the ballroom, where Daniel was waiting anxiously. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know. I'm so sorry, Alex, he said, pulling me close. We don't have to do this. Your future, your family's company. I silenced him with a kiss, not caring about the scandalized whispers around us. You are my future. The rest we'll build together. We left the gala without saying goodbye to anyone. As we drove away from my family's estate in Daniel's beat-up Honda Civic, I watched the lights of my childhood home fade in the rearview mirror. I should have felt scared, starting over with nothing but my education and determination. Instead, I felt strangely free. What my parents didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had been preparing for this possibility. The past 3 years, while working at Harrison Investment Group, I had been developing my own investment strategy, focusing on emerging technologies and sustainable energy. I had also been building connections, quiet ones, with people who saw the future the same way I did. I had $50,000 saved in a private account, not much by Harrison standards, but enough to start something. And I had an idea, one that would either prove my parents absolutely right about me or show them just how wrong they'd been. Daniel pulled up to our small apartment, my new home. Are you sure about this? He asked one more time. It's not too late to go back. I looked at him, this brilliant, kind man who taught physics to inner-city kids because he believed education could change lives. Who had supported my dreams even when they seemed impossible. I've never been more sure of anything, I said. Besides, they didn't just give me an ultimatum, they gave me a challenge. A challenge? I smiled, thinking about the plan that was already forming in my mind. They think I can't succeed without their money and connections. Fine. I'll build something bigger than Harrison Investment Group ever was. And I'll do it my way. Little did I know then just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The next 10 years would test everything I believed about myself, about business, and about what it means to create true wealth. But that night, sitting in Daniel's old car, holding the hand of the man I loved, I felt nothing but excitement for the journey ahead. What I didn't realize was that this journey would eventually lead me right back to Harrison Investment Group. But not in the way anyone could have predicted. 10 years can change everything. I sat in my corner office on the 50th floor of a gleaming downtown skyscraper, looking at the email that had just appeared in my inbox. The subject line read, Harrison Investment Group seeking strategic partnership. You need to see this, my CFO, Sarah Chin, said from the doorway. She walked in, tablet in hand. Harrison Investment Group's financials just went public. They're in worse shape than we thought. I took the tablet, scanning the numbers. The story they told was grim. Harrison Investment Group, once the crown jewel of Boston's financial district, was hemorrhaging clients. Their old-school investment approach had failed to adapt to changing markets. They'd missed the tech boom, dismissed sustainable energy as a passing fad, and clung to traditional investments until it was too late. Their stock has dropped 60% in the last year. Sarah continued. They're looking for a buyer. I leaned back in my chair, memories flooding back. 10 years ago, I'd walked away from that company, from my inheritance, with nothing but determination and a dream. Now, as CEO of Phoenix Ventures, I controlled a $500 million investment firm that specialized in exactly the kinds of innovative technologies my father had dismissed. Alex? Sarah's voice snapped me back to the present. What do you want to do? I looked out my window at the Boston skyline. Somewhere out there, my father was probably sitting in his study, trying to figure out how it had all gone wrong. Set up a meeting, I said. But not with my father. I want to meet with the board directly. The last decade had been a whirlwind. After leaving my family, I'd thrown myself into building Phoenix Ventures from the ground up. Starting with my saved $50,000, I'd focus on identifying promising tech startups and sustainable energy companies that traditional firms overlooked. Daniel had supported me every step of the way, taking extra tutoring jobs to help with our living expenses while I got the company off the ground. We lived in a tiny apartment, saved every penny, and slowly built our dream. My first big break came 2 years in, when one of our early investments, a small solar technology company, was bought by a major energy corporation. The return was substantial enough to attract serious investors, and from there, Phoenix Ventures grew exponentially. We had our struggles, of course. The first few years were lean, and there were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But with each success, each correct market prediction, our reputation grew. I never used the Harrison name to open doors. As far as the business world was concerned, I was just Alexandra Chen, having taken Daniel's last name when we married. My success was my own, built without my family's connections or influence. Now, a decade later, Phoenix Ventures was known for its forward-thinking investment strategy and impressive returns. We had offices in 3 cities, a team of brilliant analysts, and a portfolio that read like a who's who of emerging technologies. And my father's company wanted to talk about a strategic partnership. The meeting was set for the following week. I arrived early, walking into the Harrison Investment Group's boardroom for the first time in 10 years. The portraits of past CEOs still hung on the walls, my grandfather, my father, and the empty space where my portrait should have been. The board members filed in, many of them the same men who had attended that fateful gala a decade ago. They didn't recognize me at first. Why would they? The Alexandra Harrison they remembered was a young heiress in designer dresses. The woman before them now was a successful CEO in a power suit, known for her shrewd business acumen. My father entered last, stopping short when he saw me. He had aged considerably, his hair now completely gray, new lines etched deeply around his mouth. For a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, shock, perhaps even pride. But it was quickly replaced by his usual mask of control. "What is this?" he demanded, looking at the board chairman. "Mr. Harrison," the chairman said carefully, "this is Alexandra Chen, CEO of Phoenix Ventures. They're interested in discussing acquisition terms." "Acquisition?" My father's face reddened. "You mean takeover? And you didn't think to inform me who would be attending this meeting?" "I asked them not to," I said, keeping my voice professional. I wanted the board to hear our proposal without preconceptions. Sarah began presenting our offer, a fair but firm valuation of Harrison Investment Group, with terms that would protect the employees while transitioning the company into the modern era. As she spoke, I watched my father's face. I could see him struggling to reconcile the daughter he'd dismissed with the businesswoman before him. The numbers Sarah was presenting were impossible to argue with. Phoenix Ventures had the capital, the strategy, and the vision to save his company. When Sarah finished, there was a long silence. Finally, my father spoke, his voice rough. "May I have a moment alone with Ms. Chen?" The board members filed out, leaving us alone in the room where I'd spent countless hours learning about business at my father's knee. "You did all this to prove me wrong?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, Dad. I did this to prove myself right. Everything you taught me about business, about identifying opportunities, about building something lasting, I took those lessons and applied them to the future, not the past." He walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "Your grandfather, he would have understood what you've built. He was an innovator too, in his time." He turned back to me. I was the one who forgot that innovation is part of our legacy. "It's not too late," I said. "Phoenix Ventures doesn't want to dismantle Harrison Investment Group. We want to help it evolve, to honor its history while embracing the future." "And Daniel?" he asked. "Is he still?" "Still teaching physics," I said, allowing myself a small smile. "Still changing lives. We have 2 kids now, your grandchildren, but you've never met them. Emma's 7, Michael's 5. Something broke in my father's expression. "Alexandra, I know," I said softly. "Me too." The acquisition went through smoothly. The board voted unanimously to accept our offer, recognizing that Phoenix Ventures represented their best chance at survival. My father, to everyone's surprise, supported the decision. In the end, we didn't just save Harrison Investment Group. We transformed it. The combined companies, under the Phoenix Harrison Group banner, became one of the most influential investment firms in the country, known for balancing traditional wisdom with innovative strategy. My father stayed on as an advisor, though he stepped down as CEO. Slowly, cautiously, we began rebuilding our relationship. He and my mother met their grandchildren. They came to dinner at our house, not the mansion I could have afforded, but the comfortable home Daniel and I had chosen in a good school district. One evening, after a particularly successful quarter, my father and I were sitting in my office, looking out at the city lights. You know, he said, your grandfather used to say something about true wealth. Being about the courage to build something meaningful, I finished. I remember. He nodded, looking at me with what I finally recognized as pride. He would have been proud of you, Alexandra. We both are, even if I was too stubborn to see it sooner. I thought about the journey from that night at the gala to this moment, about all the lessons learned, the bridges burned and rebuilt, the legacy redefined. The funny thing is, I said, I'm not sure I would change anything. Every struggle, every setback, it all led to this, to building something that's truly mine, truly meaningful. My father was quiet for a moment. You know, I always thought I was protecting our family's legacy. But you understood something I didn't. Legacy isn't about preserving the past. It's about building a better future. Later that night, as I drove home to Daniel and our children, I thought about wealth, real wealth, not the kind that sits in trust funds or hangs in portraits on boardroom walls, but the kind that comes from having the courage to follow your heart and the determination to build something meaningful. My children would inherit a different kind of legacy than the one I was born into. They would learn that true success isn't about what you're given, but what you build. That love is worth more than money, and that sometimes losing everything is the first step to gaining something better. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Daniel teaching Emma about constellations in the backyard, Michael perched on his shoulders. The sight made me smile, remembering that night 10 years ago when I chose this life over my inheritance. It was the best investment I ever made.